Thank you all. God bless you.
Could you take a question or two? Yeah. We have time for a question or two, Jack.
So, first of all, my background is I grew up in a copper mining community.
Yes.
Phelps Dodge and Kennecott. Neither of which are there anymore, right?
Yeah.
They've been bought out. But I focus on the issue of not just mineral production, but the issue of energy transition from the major producer of electrical energy. I mean, the world moves on electrical energy, right?
Yes, it does.
And right now it's 75% fossil fired across the world, and then the other 25% is renewables, hydro, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And what I have found, and I've been in this industry for 50 years, is that the people that are driving this, and I'm not against the driving, although, you know, every time we, well, no, I won't get into the political part of this, but the people who are saying we need to transition by 2040. I mean, we have a governor in this state says you're only going to be able to buy electric vehicles by 2035. Well, if I was a car dealer, I'd put my car dealership in Payson, Arizona, El Paso, Texas, because that's where all the cars will be bought. So when they make these mandates, they seem to be making these mandates without input from people who understand somewhat how to get from here to there. And my opinion is going to be, and I've advised many of management, that you're going to have to be honest with your politicians and honest with your regulators. If you don't, you won't be here in 10 years, and your company may not be here in 10 years, because you'll be viewed as a failure. And so the messages that are being delivered to the people who are setting these standards, and I understand that I'm an engineer, if I was setting a standard, it would be a conservative standard, so I have no problem with setting standards that are stretches, right? But at least have some logic behind it. And if you think of the world as you described it, of the population in the world that are still living burning wood,
Yes.
and the things they want that we already have, I don't know how you get from A to B. I really don't, because as you said, there's no development going on for the basic requirements of getting there. And if the rest of the world wants to meet the standard of the industrial nations, we're not going to meet the CO2 standards that are being set. We're just not.
No, we're not.
Without, I do believe in innovation, without some technological breakthrough where you don't have to use copper, where you don't have to use cobalt, where you don't have to use molybdenum, where you don't have to use all rare earth metals, of which hardly any of that's mined in the United States anymore. Many of them is actually mined in countries who are enemies.
That is the problem.
So what advice would you give an engineer coming up, graduating from Mexico State University in the next 4 years, about how they would communicate with the decision makers the true facts of how you get from A to B? And the facts are, and also we're in this world together.
Yes.
So every ton of CO2 that we neutralize, I hate to say this, is a ton of CEO that can be used by our allies, right? You just kept saying, you mine the copper in Chile, you send it to the refinery in China, and then China sends it back to us.
Yes.
Now, so the CO2 that's emitted in Peru and the CO2 that's emitted in China in refining the product, do they have any standards?
No.
Yeah. See, so now you see the conundrum I feel.
Yes.
And so the group of technical leaders, whether it be engineers, physicians, chemists, the STEM, the people who understand the use of technology, we need to develop a method so they understand you need to communicate in such a way that the decision makers, who are mainly politicians, they're not chemists, they're not electrical engineers, they're not physicists, so they can understand. Because I have found that when you sit down with I'll just use a regulator since I spent most of my time talking to regulators, that if you kind of sit down with them and kind of reason through things, on a private level, they'll understand. On a public level, they'll always fall back to, how do I get elected?
No, definitely. You know, one of the things, thanks for your question. When we started looking at sustainable development, this back in 2016, our focus was improving water usage, improving energy use, minimizing the use of chemicals and reagents, and and managing waste. Primarily mining is tailings and all of that. And by doing that, using innovative technologies. At the same time, the idea was, before the energy transition, is how do we help the 25% people of the earth that are still living and using wood into somewhat of a modern world. And that was a challenge in itself. So we're looking at, we were producing about 15 to 18 million metric tons of copper. Maybe, going up to 25 million metric tons would do it. Now, again, the mining is in Chile, Peru. Now lithium is in Bolivia, not a good friend of the U.S. Argentina is becoming friends of the U.S. now. We're actually doing a project with them. But my message to the students is innovation. If you look at it, solar panels were designed back in 1840s, windmills back in the 1800s. I mean, Nikola Tesla was 1876, I believe. We need to improve or come out with new things or come out with new technologies, I believe, and also how we do things. In the mining processes, how we use less water. Maybe those technologies are old. We need to come up with new ways of doing it, also of fabrication or manufacturing of things. And I'm not sure if that emphasis in. But what is real, we don't have the metals and minerals to achieve those goals. So how do we go about it? That's a huge challenge.
Well, my point is no matter how efficient you make your mining, no matter how efficient you make your manufacturing, if you're taking a society from burning wood to living in a home, maybe 1,000 square foot home, that transition from burning wood to that 1,000 square foot home, no matter how efficient are the processes in between, you're going to have an environmental impact.
Oh, yes.
It'll be less of an environmental impact than you have with today's technology, but you're going to have an environmental impact.
Totally.
Well, so when you set these standards, not you, but when the standards are set that by 2050 we're going to be a zero emitter, that's an unreasonable standard.
It sets a wrong expectation. I think if we could set something that's more clear, concise, and practical, yes, all for it. I mean, if you go to Argentina, Buenos Aires, you're going to have all the Argentinians all of a sudden change all their vehicles to electrical. That's not going to happen. But innovation is key. And I think if we focus on small things, small gains, quick wins, I think we can achieve that. And eventually we'll get that to new things. But, another example that comes up is nuclear energy. I mean, I just got back from France. Those guys use nuclear energy. They have, we're not using that as well. Anyways, there's a lot of solutions out there. My concern, I guess, not concern of my knowledge, my life is in mining and mineral processing. And the way I'm looking at it, yeah, it is great that there's a demand for it, but I also look at it as a human being and how it's going to affect everybody else. I'm going, we got to do something about this in a positive way. And through the new blood coming into the workforce, I think it's going to make a big difference, and I hope so.
Yeah, I call it the neuron flood. The new neurons coming into the workforce have to look at the world differently than the old neurons.
I'm sorry, I did not warn you that there is an energy expert, Jack Davis, in the audience.
No, I love it.
But I want to ask Jack's question in a different way, and that is, what is one specific skill that you would advise the current graduates who are coming out in the next 3-4 years that they acquire outside what they learned in their engineering curricula? Soft or hard?
One of the things that the students are presenting the rocket, right? The rocket project. One of the things that maybe it's not taught, but we call operational readiness, and is how you get a project all the stuff, yeah, all the technical stuff is built, all of that, we can do the analysis, but how do you get people trained, developed, develop standard operating procedures, all of the manuals, all of that, and how do you, when you release that, then you have a project that's successful. Because you could have a project that's very well built, everything, and when you finish it, you hand it over to the client, they don't know how to operate it. So part of developing a project, you also have to develop the people that are going to manage that project. And I don't think that's taught, or maybe it's not really push forward. Is yes, the technical side, but also the human side and the development of the people that are going to do this. Not the project itself, but who are going to operate or manage these. There's got to be a link right there. And that would be an advice, is look into operational readiness and development.
Well, that's interesting. You did not give a ready-made standard answer, communication skills. But this is part of communication skills.
It is. Yeah, maybe yeah. It is communication skills. It's planning. It's developing. It's developing the methodology. How you're going to do this? Yeah. But yes, going back to yes.
Right.
Sometimes they're talking. I think you understand operational readiness.
Well, you got this idea from our Atomic Aggies
Yes.
presentation?
Yes, and the reason why I think what I saw was that lack of communication that didn't happen. They put extra weight and all that. There was not an operational readiness plan in place to launch.
Right.
Technically, yes, but the human side of
Right.
that was not there. But it's something that I see all over the industry, all over the world. That's something that needs to be done and always introduced.
What could we do? I thought you were going to go to that other area where engineers have to learn how to explain what their idea is to this group of non-engineers. Didn't you have any challenges there?
Oh, yes.
To have to talk to the policymakers or the politicians or these non-engineers?
No, that's a good point. I believe you brought it up. The language that you do when you talk to, let's say, to a board of directors is going to be one way, the way you sell your product to the plant manager. The communications of how you sell your idea, your services, even to your peers, that is something that sometimes is lacking. Is having, how do I tell you the present a problem and a solution, and how I'm going to go ahead and do it, and why am I doing this, and why is it beneficial in presenting this concept or this idea. That's something that when we get young engineers come into our company, we want to get those creative juices and also to teach them how to sell their ideas, how to be assertive, how to be direct, how to be to the point. And a lot of times you have to stand your ground or you get run over. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's what you all told the Atomic Aggies student leaders today. If you want to ask money, ask. Be direct, be straightforward, because they were not asking the group for the money, although they intended to ask.
No, definitely. And one of the things is dream big, but also I look back when I started. I was pretty shy when I graduated from college. That what helped me is I played the piano, so I was okay doing that in front of people. But the thing is, be positive. If you have a message, just say it out loud. Just present it, but always know what the outcome is. You got to know why you're saying it, when you're saying it, and to who you're saying it. It's not just presenting something. It's you need to know what the outcome is of what you're asking for, or what you are, showcasing. Salesmanship. Yes, sir.
I have a question for you, Ed, about, engineers are renowned for being problem solvers.
Yes, sir.
Yet, we live in a world now that simple facts, no one agrees on simple facts. Half the country doesn't agree with the other half. They won't even talk to each other.
That's right.
They won't even listen to each other. So in this kind of society that we live in now, how do we get to those, I think you mentioned the word, pragmatic solutions? How do we get there when we're not even talking to each other? And we're disputing every little fact that's there. I mean, we can't even agree that this is more crimson. I mean, literally. I mean, it's, and so, I think the, part of our challenge is, engineers are focused on rational, they focus on logic.
Right.
And we're not in a world, that was the world back, I would say, pre-millennial.
Yes.
Post-millennial, heck with logic and rationality. That's not where it is. I mean, you see it in our national, our state leaders. No one, I mean, who cares? They don't care about rational and logic. They care about political points and all sorts of things. So how do you get your message across to have the kind of, I think, because you're talking about big impacts, trying to make big impacts. How do you do that in a world that we live in now?
If I had the answer, I'd be running for office.
Yeah.
But this used to thought. Okay, I spent quite a bit of time in Argentina, been going back in there for the last 20 years. They went through the Perón time, and you had the Kirchners and all those guys. They elected a president, just elected a president, Javier Milei, which is libertarian, totally opposite to what they had before. But the youth elected him. He was actually put in office by the youth. So the youth got tired of, call it collectivism. And I see that difference in different nations that I go to. I was in Greece. I would talk to the labor laws and how they do that. Well, if you're not certified to do this, you cannot do that, blah, blah, blah. But I guess to answer your question, I think we need to talk to each other, and I don't want to use that word, but so it doesn't sound romantic, but with love. We have to be empathetic. We got to tell the truth, tell the facts, and not try to offend the other individual or deny their, what their belief system is. And I think if we say with facts and understanding, I think the message will come across. I would like to ask the students here, the young folks here, when we discuss energy transition or climate change, did my message come across against climate change or pro or middle, or how did you guys see it, or the challenges that are facing into addressing the issues of climate change, which are real, by the way, but how did you guys receive that?
I was pretty neutral. It wasn't against climate change or for climate change. It's a reminder it's going to be there no matter what. So.
And then another thing that you brought up is, and I looked at this, is, okay, so we're going to take the U.S., we're going to start with net zero. Well, India ain't going to do it. Pakistan is not going to do it. China is definitely not going to do it. So how do we, stop fighting each other? Let's say we all agree, but then how do we get the other countries to agree?
Well, that's tough. If you're living in a shack burning wood, agree to that, right? Would you do that? No, you wouldn't on a personal level when you see that there's, if someone wanted to come in here and build a mine, now that's what kind of confuses me a little bit. Build a mine and create jobs. So by standard of living, there is an environmental impact to that.
Yes.
There's a climate impact to that.
Yes.
But if you're living in a world where you're burning wood in order to cook and heat, usually the climate impact is thought of in a second way. What they're thinking the first way is, well, wouldn't it be nice if I lived over here in this 1,000 square foot home or whatever, which is a long way from here to there. And that was the point I made earlier, is that going back to the political division that was just mentioned, there is a political divide, not just in our country, I mean, between countries, of everything else, right? And that's basically fired a lot by the 24-hour, 365, 8,760 hour a year news cycle, right? I mean, when you and I were growing up, something could happen. It'd take 2 months for us to find out, maybe.
Yeah.
And you watched it on the Walter Cronkite. Now it takes a nanosecond. And so as the world population gets more education, what the rest of the world's like, becomes more difficult to say, well, why should I just stay here where I am? And that's why I say you have to be able to communicate with these decision makers in a simple way so they understand. You know, what we do is we say we're gonna be 2080, I'm picking a date, that we're gonna be CO2 emission free, and it's gonna be affordable. Now, do you really believe that? I don't really believe that. We may be emission free, but I haven't got a slice idea it's gonna be affordable, and so I mentioned this morning, I just retired from a company, chairman of the board, and I said, what you have to add to that phrase, every time you talk to a decision maker, is we are depending upon innovation and breakthrough technology. If it's not that, and I'm not talking about solar or wind, I'm talking about a breakthrough
Right.
in technology, we're not gonna get there in terms of being affordable.
That
It
is
just won't
correct.
happen. Now, I happen to believe a lot in that. I believe that there are smart people out there, a lot smarter.
Oh, yeah.
A lot smarter people. And if they can attract the capital, then there will be these step function changes in how we consume and generate electricity or anything else. But when you add that phrase, it has to be affordable, I fall off the turnip truck. Unless you add the phrase, you understand, we are depending upon a significant breakthrough in the way we create and use energy. Not just more efficiency, I'm talking about a step function change, or you won't get there.
That's correct.
You're just not gonna get there. And that's why I say, somehow, and I'll talk to the new neurons, they're gonna be coming out in society. People always get concerned when I use that term, but I like to use that term. Coming into society, they need to be thinking about how they communicate using facts as best they know them, and not old facts, but maybe new facts, as best they know them, to the people who are making these decisions. Monumental decisions, by the way. These are not little bitty decisions. When you make this decision that in the company I was involved with, that we're going to be 80% less CO2 emitter by 2050 than we were in 2010. 80%. We can't build new hydro, we can't build new nuclear, and it turns out Oregon is one of the fastest growing states in the country. How do you get there?
You
How do
don't.
get there without technology. I'm talking about step function, not a linear function. I'm talking about a step function change. And when you sit down with people who are making those decisions, they say, "Oh, you're just an old executive. You don't know. You're old neurons." I say, "Yeah, I'm old neurons, but there's some wisdom in those neurons."
No.
And they do say that, by the way.
That step change you're asking about, you're talking about, I don't have the capacity. I hope the people.
The capacity's
Yes.
back there.
Yeah, but right there, they're going to do it.
That's
Yeah,
the capacity.
yeah. That's where the dreamers, the visionaries. But got to give them a challenge, kind of like Kenny gave us a challenge back in '62, right? So the challenge is to be out there. Okay, we need to come up with a new energy source, a new energy, and focus that way.
You know, to talk about the kind of step challenge, most of the people in this room, when I look around, may not remember this, but in 1978, there was a fuel use act passed by the United States government. We thought we were running out of natural gas. And so they actually passed a law that you couldn't use natural gas in boiler fuel. In Arizona, what we did was because we owned a gas and electric company, we couldn't put the natural gas into new home builds. So what you had was the core of the city was electric and natural gas, and then you had this big band during the Fuel Use Act where it was all electric. You couldn't have any natural gas in your home. And then the step function happened, right?
Yeah, it's right.
And now you can buy gas, what, $2 a million?
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of step function we need in
An energy.
the other part of this issue here. I haven't seen one, but that was a tremendous step function. Now you can basically give gas away, natural gas away. And that's the transition fuel, in my opinion, even though the politicians don't like it.
It is a clean, well, as clean a burning fuel as it can be. And it's easier to separate hydrogen out of natural gas than it is out of water. Takes a lot less energy,
Maybe
so,
there'll be a day when you fill up your car with water,
yeah.
and you have an extraction in your car, it takes the hydrogen out, burns the hydrogen, and spits out water out of the tailpipe.
Yeah, that would be great.
The kind of function I'm talking about.
So JD, I hope you're following that,
And you put your
because that's what you're expected to do. So we put this thing in there, out comes the pipe water, but there is some separation of hydrogen and all that. So there's a lot right. I think you should trademark neuron, N-E-W-R-O-N. Let's do that. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
I had a question.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on, there's discussions about, going to the moon and mining from there, or going to Mars and mining. I mean, that's Elon Musk's favorite statement, right? You can go and colonize Mars and get minerals from there. How likely, my question is, how likely is it in the next 10, 15 years that could happen?
I think we can go mine it. I think we can get it. I'm not sure how we're going to bring it back. But that's a challenge. Yeah, I think we can go out there, we can get it, but that's a lot of metals, and bringing it back, I think that would be the challenge, but it can be done.
Well, are we
It sure
really at the
doesn't-
limit of what we have on this planet?
No, but it's deep.
It's not about limit, it's about environmental efficiency.
Yeah.
You mine it there, you bring it back. Environmental impact and carbon footprint is much lower.
So we want that planet to go bad instead of Earth.
There's nobody living there.
No, it's an asteroid. No, we're talking mostly asteroids, actually.
And the asteroid.
The desire to pollute the environment, I could see that.
Create
But-
a transporter.
We
Go
have to
back
get
to Star Trek.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much. Please give a big round of applause for our.
Thank you.